Welcome everybody to a very special episode of MacStories Unwind. Today we are going to quiz Federico Viticci all about the MacPad. But before we dive into the questions, I want to suggest everyone go listen to the upcoming episode of Magic Rays of Light, which I just finished appearing on to talk all about the Apple TV Plus movie Napoleon. Of course, there was a lot of other things covered in the episode this week as well. But, you know, the Magic Rays of Light crew joined us just a few weeks ago at this point. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, this is a particularly good episode. I really enjoyed joining Sigmund and Devin to talk a little bit about that movie. You can find it by going to the website and go to macstories.net/podcast. There you'll find not only Magic Rays of Light, but all of our shows. All right, Federico, with that little promo aside, I want to dig into the questions we have from listeners, and I'm going to let Jonathan kick it off. I have a few of my own, and we can kind of maybe tag team this a little bit.
Okay.
But we've been watching you do this from afar, and it still feels so surreal to me that you've done this. And every day that I think about it, I have a new question for you. So despite having recorded app stories about this, I think there's a lot more we can dig into, and also get the perspectives of some of the people in the audience as well. Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm coming up with questions by the minute. I was just getting ready to start and come up with another one. So I think if we start off with a few questions, then we can jump over to some member ones as well. My first question I thought of was actually, I came up with while listening to App Stories yesterday, which was, you mentioned about the hypervisor hack. And I wonder if you'd ever considered doing that to the iPad. I know or looked into doing it.
I was just looking into, it's funny you mentioned this because I was just looking into sort of trying to read more about the current jailbreak scene. Last night I was doing some reading there, and the answer is no. I don't think I want to get back into my jailbreaking days again. I'm very much fascinated by the fact that there are still people out there who are still jailbreaking their devices, but jailbreaking these days usually means like staying behind in terms of the operating system that you install on your iPhone or iPad.
Right,
Usually like there's a jailbreak for the previous version of iOS and iPadOS. That is not really something that I want to do because it's my job to stay current and talk about the latest and greatest. So I very much would like Apple to release an official version of Hypervisor. Hypervisor being the framework that they have on macOS to support virtualization. So the idea of virtualizing through Hypervisor another operating system. And if you imagine like a version of Hypervisor running on iPadOS, you may wonder, well, what's the advantage there over, say, using Sidecar or over using, something like a jailbreak? Or the idea is that when you virtualize an operating system, so think of it as Boot Camp on macOS, for example. If only we had a real virtualized macOS on iPadOS, that would allow you to tap into the iPad hardware. So having, for example, access to USB accessories and peripherals, like and data transmitted over USB or Thunderbolt, or even just using the iPadOS cellular connectivity, right? So virtualizing macOS through Hypervisor on an iPad would mean that when you plug something into your iPad, the Mac in a virtualized environment, in a sandbox and virtualized environment, would still see that USB peripheral. That is, of course, something that I do not get at the moment with my MacPad because I'm just using macOS via a virtual screen on the iPad. But in practical terms, it means that if I plug anything into my iPad, it doesn't get recognized by macOS, because macOS is just saying, well, I'm displaying the user interface on this iPad, but if you want to plug something into your computer, you got to plug it into the Mac. So if I plug, for example, a USB drive into the iPad, into my MacPad, into the display side of things, nothing gets recognized by the Mac, which is, of course, a disadvantage of this approach. But that's a long answer for the question of I thought about it, but I don't want to jailbreak my iPad.
That seems fair enough.
I can totally understand that. You know, I think I'll ask you one of the ones from the town hall questions from a member who TL Holiday asked about when you're working, have you felt any uncertainty about whether a particular file is in on my iPad, the Macintosh HD, or in iCloud? How do you juggle all that?
Oh, that's a good question. Not really, because I mostly rely on iCloud Drive to sync stuff between devices. At the
Okay.
moment, I do not keep my desktop and documents folder on the Mac synced with iCloud Drive. If I want to move something over to the iPad, I can either just use AirDrop or put it in an iCloud Drive folder, and a few seconds later it shows up on the iPad. But really, the thing I've done most is rely on Universal Clipboard instead. So, for example, if I have a file on the iPad and I copy the file on the iPadOS side, when I switch over back to macOS and I hit paste, then usually, as long as there are not any bugs, usually that file gets pasted on the Mac. And the only stuff that I keep on my iPad folder is my Obsidian Vault, but Obsidian is using Obsidian Sync. So even if that's technically local to the iPad, it still syncs over to the Mac thanks to Obsidian Sync. So I just rely on iCloud Drive, which is not as nice as Dropbox for a lot of things, but it's also pretty. It's good enough for me these days.
Right. And that to me is a lot of what's interesting to me. I think it speaks to the fact that you're not doing anything particularly fancy with the software side of the setup.
Yeah.
It's that, these tools, these features are baked into Mac OS and iPad OS already, and you're just taking advantage of the same kind of things that I take advantage of when I'm using my iPad and Mac side by side in universal control mode at my desk. It's just that yours are fused together with magnets, which is very fancy. Jonathan, if you allow me a follow-up, I have a follow-up that I thought of in connection with the same question.
Sure.
The follow-up is this, Federico. My question is, do you ever get confused about which system you're using? I see how the files is kind of a transparent thing for you because of the way the software works, but do you ever forget kind of whether you're in Mac OS or iPad OS?
I sometimes I do not get confused by whether it's iPadOS or macOS because of a single UI element. Well, two. The dock on the left means I'm using the Mac, and also the menu bar. I think the menu bar is the giveaway that I'm using macOS. But the one aspect where I still get confused over is touching the screen. I tend to forget that I can sort of touch the screen in Sidecar. I can pinch to zoom. I can scroll with two fingers, but I find myself just tapping with my index finger on the screen, and that's not supported in Sidecar. If I want to perform a single click, I gotta use the Apple Pencil. So that is the one aspect that it's still kind of breaking my brain. This whole setup sort of breaks your brain, right? Because it does. You're basically using a machine that doesn't exist, and so you're bringing over your muscle memory to a platform that doesn't conform to that muscle memory. And so the one interaction that trips me up is sometimes I touch the screen and nothing happens, and for a split second I think, oh, it's broken, and then I realize, no, it's not broken. It's what I'm doing that is not. It's what I'm doing that is not like a proper way to do things.
I just thought of something. Have you tried that new app from the AstroPad folks that lets you use an iPad as a touchpad for the Mac?
I haven't.
I wonder if that would work if you had the Mac in slide over.
Oh, that's just asking for more confusion. I think it's like
I think it is, but I think the guy just gave you an article assignment right there.
Yeah, maybe I should think about it. And fun fact, I can tell you that compared to yesterday, there's already a small tweak in the setup. Because as I was publishing the story, an Amazon package arrived. And this Amazon package contained something that I discovered very late in the game, over the weekend. So it's this new magnetic cover that I'm testing for the iPad Pro. It's called the BlackRock. Don't ask me why, it's the name of the brand. It's the BlackRock back cover. So this is effectively just a back cover. So the thing that I manually cut, by hand myself, is just a back cover for the iPad, but it has a built-in kickstand. It's very similar. Remember the base model iPad that Apple launched 2 years ago at this point?
Right.
So the one that has a built-in kickstand in the back cover and the detachable keyboard, it's literally just the back cover. So what I'm doing is I stuck, of course, 3 magnets to the back of the black rock cover. And now it's sort of even better than before, because now I have an iPad that has a cover that can be magnetically attached to my mounting system. But when I detach it, it also comes with a built-in kickstand. So this will probably be an update to the MacPad setup, and I'll drop a link in the show notes. I found out about this, unfortunately too late to be included in the story, but that is the one tweak that I have already brought to the setup.
Nice. I wasn't aware that they make back covers for the
Yeah.
iPad.
Boy, I really hope they make one for the new iPads as soon as they are. And I kind of wonder if the new iPads will actually be compatible with the existing accessories for the current iPad Pros that we have. I know that judging from the leaked schematics that have appeared online, there's like a 1.5 millimeter difference. The new iPads should be 1 millimeter wider than the existing ones, which is interesting. Like they're making them slightly bigger but thinner. So we'll see. I hope that the accessories are backwards compatible, and if not, I'll just have to buy new ones, I guess.
Yeah, I think also one thing that's I can never really find one of these, but the like a magnetic back, but that also has pass-through charging. I don't know if that's.
Yeah,
I haven't seen a single product that does that, because obviously it's possible with the Magic Keyboard, but I can't seem to find a single accessory that does that, which I was looking for my new desk setup.
Yeah,
it seems
that implementing the smart connector is something that Apple sort of guards very closely and only collaborates with proven partners, meaning Logitech. Like I think it's the only I think it's the only third-party manufacturer not even Belkin. I mean, at this point, I really think of Belkin almost as an Apple subsidiary in terms of accessories. But not even Belkin has a smart connector enabled cover for the iPad Pro, which is strange to me. I hope that for whatever is next for the new iPad Pros, my hope is that they standardize, moving away from the smart connector and just using MagSafe, an iPad version of MagSafe. I think at this point, for all the fun that we made when the rumors first appeared of the new iPad Pros getting MagSafe and all the people saying, well, what are you going to use MagSafe for on the iPad? I hope that there's a story there about standardizing accessories more than wirelessly charging your iPad.
Yeah, no, that would be good, I think. I have a question about taking little things from from Mac OS to iPad OS and vice versa, because I was thinking about how the slide over feature alongside Mac OS seems like a really handy use. The way you can have your music or your messages in slide over while you're working on the Mac. And it seems like actually something that'll be quite easy just to port over to the Mac and have that sort of feature. It's essentially just the notification center. So I was wondering if there's any features or that you thought about on the iPad or the Mac that could go to the other platform.
That's an interesting question. Obviously, slide over is more of like, it's nice to use it because it's so easy to activate, right? But it's obviously like you could replicate what I'm doing with slide over on a Mac just by, say, assigning a keyboard combination or something to Better Touch Tool or Keyboard Maestro to invoke a small window on the right side of the screen, and you wouldn't have to use slide over. But I use slide over because it's so convenient. I think something that I would bring over from the Mac to the iPad is a menu bar like system for discovering keyboard shortcuts and menus inside apps. Like I really like how the menu bar on macOS sort of grounds you in the current application that you're using, but also serves as a way to navigate the app and discover keyboard shortcuts. Like if you think about it, it's a really genius piece of UI element. Like it serves multiple functions in such a compact, it's a thin strip of text basically, and it serves a lot of purposes at once. So that is the one thing that I would love to have on iPadOS, as opposed to the current status bar on iPadOS, which is like this horizontal bar that it's mostly empty. It just comes with the time and the battery and the clock, and that's about it. So that's probably something that I would like to steal from the Mac and bring it to the iPad.
Yeah, the status bar is like one of those things that is just a dead giveaway about the iPad's
Yeah.
origins as being like an iPhone,
Yes.
but
Yes.
right? I mean, you look at it and it just screams mobile phone to you. But I mean, you're right. It would be nice if there was more to it than that. Let me ask you about how you're using the iPad and iPad OS, because you've described about how you're using things like slide over, which is kind of the traditional multitasking method for iPad OS, but we've also got Stage Manager now, and you have the ability, since you've got a Mac connected, to use the Mac's pointer on the iPad. What's kind of the breakdown between which modes you use day to day?
Yeah, I think iPad OS at this point, given that I'm using a Mac OS with a Mac laptop, a lot more than before, I switch back to iPad OS when I want to use iPad OS with touch. That is the sort of the most important sort of separation line between the two. Like you wanna
Okay.
you wanna you wanna rip apart the display. It means you want to use iPad OS, and therefore you're using touch. So touch interactions. That's when I go to iPad OS. But I also go to iPad OS even with the keyboard attached. So in laptop mode, when I want to have a more sort of focused environment of
Mm-hmm.
sorts, and it's more of a mental thing than anything. I mean, I could just use macOS and use full screen mode or enable do not disturb and replicate the same experience. But there's something about switching over to iPadOS that tricks my brain into thinking, well, now you're supposed to just use this app right now. And
Yeah.
contributing to that trick, to that mental trick, was also the idea of turning off Stage Manager, because then it forces me, by default, with Stage Manager turned off on iPad OS, it defaults to full screen mode, and that really helps. Like, when I sit down, switch back to iPadOS, I tap Obsidian. Obsidian opens in full screen. I don't have any distractions anymore. So it's just a mental trick to put me in writing mode, for example, or in editing
Right.
mode. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a mental trick, but I also think it's partly the UI. I mean, I feel the same way when I, like yesterday in particular, I was struggling with kind of finishing up a story. And so I grabbed my iPad Pro and I sat on the couch and just started typing away. And there's something about being on the iPad Pro that I find is more of a writing mode. It works better. I don't use it a ton, but it does free me. Maybe it's partly the way I have notifications set up on that device, but I do find it allows me to focus a little bit
Yeah.
more than when I'm sitting at my Mac.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question about Vision Pro. So I know you talked about recently with Vision Pro how you're really enjoying the experience and you're getting a lot of work done, but now you've got this new setup. So I'm wondering how you're juggling the two. Are you now finding yourself using the MacPad more than the Vision Pro, or are you sort of working out different ways to use it in different situations? How's that balance going?
Yeah, the reality is that I've really spent a lot more time with the Mac lately because I needed to finish this story and because I came up with this idea. So um, the truth is that I, over the past 2 weeks especially, I haven't really spent a ton of time working with the Vision Pro because this story was a priority, because I wanted to get it. I wanted to get this out there before the new iPad Pros as soon as possible, because I feared that it was either going to be irrelevant or somebody else was going to come up with the same idea. And in fact, I got an email from someone last night saying that, when after you posted that video a few weeks ago on MacStories showing how to remove the display from a MacBook Air, I bought a broken MacBook Air from eBay, and I had the same idea as you. I started using an iPad as an external display for it, but instead of using Sidecar, I was using a capture card over USB, and basically using HDMI out from the Mac. So I was really concerned that someone else, or maybe Luke Miani himself on YouTube, I was concerned that somebody else was gonna come up with the same idea and beat me to it. And I was also, I always had that thought in the back of my mind of like, well, maybe Apple comes out with a new iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard, actually the new Pro version of the Magic Keyboard actually lets you switch to macOS. They're never gonna do it, but I was still concerned, and so I prioritized the MacPad. I basically only used for the past couple of weeks the Vision Pro at night to play Final Fantasy VII, but the plan is to dig in again over, starting today and tomorrow over the next few weeks, because I really missed working on the Vision Pro. And after all, this whole experiment started because I wanted to have a better keyboard for the Vision Pro. So I missed using it, and I will dig in again soon.
All right. There's one thing that we talked about on App Stories, Federico, that I guess it never had occurred to me before we spoke, which is you've now got a MacBook Air with the best battery life of any MacBook Air around because it's not driving a display.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense for what the magnitude of difference is between the MacBook you're using now and the one you used that had a screen attached to it?
So I haven't performed any benchmarks or taken any measurements, but just if I were to guess, I would say that I like doubled the battery life of a MacBook Air, which is already pretty ridiculous. Like the MacBook Air lasts forever, but I can basically work an entire day, like 6 or 7 hours, and then come back like the day after, and it's not even at 50%. Like it's really like if I basically never intentionally charge the MacBook Air, because by the time that I have to record a podcast during the week, so I'm plugging in my MacBook Air into the studio display. The studio display tops up the MacBook Air again. And so
wow.
I am unintentionally always charged up, but not because I'm charging the MacBook Air, because a couple of times, 2-3 times each week, I'm recording a podcast at my desk and the studio display charges the MacBook Air. So yeah, I only have to charge the iPad. That's the thing that's consuming battery. It's the display, not the Mac.
Oh man, I love that. I absolutely love that. To me, as cool as your project is, I really am intrigued by the use of it with the Vision Pro. I mean, that's kind of where your journey started, because with the whole idea of it. Why do I have to have a laptop in front of me with a blank screen staring me in the face? And I kind of feel the same way. And I can having a keyboard that had that kind of battery life and a computer baked right into it would be pretty nice with the Vision Pro.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Apple is never going to do this, right? I do not imagine Apple offering a computer. I mean, they do offer a desktop computer that is just a computer with no other accessory, but a keyboard with a trackpad that is also a computer and nothing else. I don't think they're ever going to do it.
No.
But there is like this idea of like, well, what if the iPad, a future iPad secretly came with macOS inside, but you could only unlock it if you paired a Magic Keyboard with it? And that's an interesting idea, I think. Well, what if the iPad was capable of virtualizing macOS, but only if you had compatible Apple hardware to pair with it? And that is sort of a similar idea, but different.
Yeah, that is interesting. I can only imagine that would get people riled up about anti-competitive behavior.
I mean, people get riled up anyway, right? So might as well just do it.
True. Just go for it.
Do you actually think Apple would ever do some sort of product like this, Federico?
Oh yeah. I think in a couple of years we're gonna see this product. It just doesn't. I've reached a point where I am convinced that it doesn't seem feasible as Apple keeps adding platforms to platforms, now they have Vision OS, and realistically they're going to have Audio OS or Home OS at some point.
Right.
And here on the laptop side of things, they find themselves maintaining two different but similar platforms, iPadOS and macOS. And clearly PC market on the other end of the spectrum has been moving in this direction of like convertible computers that you can touch and you can use with a keyboard or not. And so I think it would be a smart decision to say, well, now if you want to work with an Apple laptop, you have this hybrid system. And I think it will eventually happen. And I know that Apple said, 10 years ago, Steve Jobs said or whatever, like those are not good ideas, but times change and companies change. And so I think they will do it eventually, but it's too soon, probably, especially now that the company is rightfully distracted by Vision OS and sort of bringing that platform up to speed with the rest of their ecosystem.
Yeah, after seeing what you've done, it feels inevitable to me too. I mean, I think this is not, months off, this is years off, but I do feel like it's going to happen at some point. But I also wonder too, Federico, like what would Apple do? The Surface, we have the Microsoft Surface, and they don't put the guts of the computer both in the screen and in the keyboard, which is essentially what you've done. And obviously there's a cost aspect of that, which is one of the questions we got from one of the club members. Where do you think the compromises would maybe be made in an actual device that Apple created for consumers? Because I do find it as intriguing and interesting as it is to me to have all of the hardware in both devices simultaneously, so you'd lose nothing when you tear them apart. I got to imagine that they're going to compromise somewhere on that, and I just wonder where it'll be.
Yeah, it seems to me that the compromise should be, down the line once we have an M4 or M5 series of chips, if and when that chip process switches to a 2 nanometer process or even a 1 nanometer process, I think the solution is that the computer should be in the display. The computer should be the tablet, and so the tablet. If you think about it, realistically, there's going to be an M3 in the iPad and in the MacBook Air. So the same chip can power two different operating systems. And so I think that the answer is the tablet should be the computer and the keyboard should be the accessory. I think
you're going to kill my Ultimate Vision Pro accessory.
Well, I'm sorry, but yeah, down the line, I think Apple should obviously make a better input accessory for the Vision Pro. So to the point where using a MacBook just to have a better input system for the Vision Pro is an absurd idea. I did it. I'm doing it, but it's absurd, right? If you think about it, I shouldn't have to do it. I shouldn't have to use a Mac just because I wanted a better keyboard and trackpad for the Vision Pro, and yet here we are. So I think down the line, if you think long term, 2-3 years, there should be a better standalone input accessory for the Vision Pro. So at that point, you won't have to dream about this product, John, because you'll just have a new version of a Magic Keyboard and trackpad that you can use with your Vision Pro with all the benefits of using a decapitated MacBook Air right now.
Right. Well, here's my Galaxy Brain product, which is a Mac in the form factor of like a Roku stick or, like a Fire TV stick.
And now you're going too far.
It's not the most powerful Mac in the world, but it gives you, it leverages Mac OS, and you just plug it into the developer strap on your Vision Pro and have it hanging behind your ear.
That is some wild thinking over there.
This is why I don't work at Apple. My ideas are just too advanced and too much for that company.
Yeah, I've wondered about that being a sort of idea that they might be able to do in the future about having because the iPhone has become so powerful that maybe you would have that sort of size being your computer, and then you could use it as a phone, or you could plug it into a big screen, and the screen would have maybe a bit more power in it, or then you attach a keyboard. It seems like it'd be quite a neat idea, but I suspect that maybe they wouldn't want to do it because it would kind of it would kind of cannibalize all their other products if you just everyone's just getting an iPhone and not getting a Mac or not getting a an iPad. But it seems like quite a good idea.
Right, and that is obviously a concern, right, with this kind of product. When you have a convertible computer from Apple, you're not buying separately a MacBook and an iPad. You're buying one thing, which in theory means less money for the company, right? Because you're selling one fewer unit of each. And so obviously, the answer, make it very expensive, which is, could be a way to compensate for the fact that people are not buying two products anymore. They're just buying one. And sure, you can buy one, but it's going to be very expensive. And I don't think after the Vision Pro, I don't think Apple has any second thoughts about selling you even a $2,000 convertible laptop. I mean, compared to the Vision Pro, easy peasy.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's interesting too. It reminds me a little bit of back in the day when there were rumors that Apple was going to have a docking station for laptops that was built into a screen. So basically, you would slot your MacBook into the back of what looked like an iMac, and that would be your convertible desktop laptop mode. And I think for the same kind of reasons you just described, that never existed. There's been so many. There are very few products that the Apple has made that have that kind of convertible form factor. I guess the original iPod could be used as a standalone hard drive for a while, which was kind of wild, but that wasn't really a computing device. So it's interesting. I still feel like it's inevitable, but at the same time, there's not a lot of precedent for it either.
Yeah, I mean, we're still doing it somewhat with our laptops, and I mean, I'm looking at my laptop now. My laptop's closed; it's plugged into my studio display. So we're going from laptop to desktop. I mean, I guess it's not too much of a stretch to go from tablet to laptop, then to desktop. But yeah, I'm almost certain that the money is a reason why they haven't really is one of the reasons why they haven't approached this this sort of product for sure. Nilian actually asked a question which I'm interested in as well, which is, can you close the MacPad like a regular laptop?
Unfortunately not. That is one of the flaws of my quote-unquote design, where by design I mean sticking 3 magnets to the bottom of my computer and the back of the iPad.
Is it design?
I think I had a footnote or something in my story where, if I had the skills or the time or, just the resources, I would be really curious to see if possible at all to come up with a 3D printed hinge system for this kind of product, like actually swap the hinge for the display of the MacBook Air with the hinge that allowed you to attach an iPad and close it flat, shut on top of the MacBook Air keyboard. Like that would be an interesting project to waste a couple of weeks into, but I don't have a 3D printer, and there's so like realistically, how many people in the world are going to replicate this experiment? Like, I would say, I feel very comfortable saying that maybe less than 20 people worldwide are going to attempt this. Maybe because they have a broken M1 MacBook Air, or they just have a spare and they have a free weekend, and they're like, you know what, let me try Federico's project. I don't think, even the market on Etsy, for example, for that kind of 3D printed accessory, like 10 people are going to buy it. And 5 of those purchases are going to be from me. So, yeah.
Well, and doing hinges is not just as easy as 3D printing a piece of plastic.
Exactly. One thought that I had, but it seemed too difficult to pull off, was using the actual hinge made by Apple and basically carving the display out of the MacBook Air's own display shell. So carving out the panel and sticking an iPad in there. I thought about it, and then I stopped myself because I thought, there's a limit even for me.
There are people doing that with the old
yes
right MacBooks, the old iMac.
Yes.
There's people doing that. There's people doing that, carving out panels and slotting like an iPad in there. Yeah, but the MacBook Air is so thin, and these iPads are thicker, right? So how could you even do it? Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today for this special Mac Stories Unwind, all about the MacPad. Thanks for joining me, Jonathan.
No problem. Good to be here.
And Federico, it's good to talk to you as always.
Of course. Thank you.
And don't forget to check out Magic Rays of Light. That's it for this week. We will be back with another episode of Mac Stories Unwind next week. Bye, guys.
Ciao, John.
See you later.